moving that, this is the 4-station plan, that's the 5-station plan.
When we started checking the records on Dewberry to see how busy it was and the types of calls we have out there, we found that since 2008, there's been a total of 16 structure fires, an average of 4 per year, that the Dewberry Avenue station was first due at. The arrival time this year for the second due engine is averaging 35 seconds after the Dewberry engine on the 4 structure fires they've had this year so far.
I will say, just for the sake of accuracy, to update this slide, we did have a fire 2 days ago?
Yes.
Along Main Street extension, which would have also been included in as a where this particular Dewberry station would have been the first engine due. So that number should be 17.
This is a list of the structure fires that Dewberry Avenue Station has responded to since January of 2008 through July of this year. If you look at the calls that are in yellow, what we did is we went back and we checked on the type of the fire. Any fire inside of a structure, according to NINFERS, is classified as a structure fire. If you look, the first two, there was the first one, it was an electrical, or the second one was electrical problem, no fire. First one, a small kitchen fire out on arrival. The fire on Hillman Avenue was a fire that went to 2 alarms. The next 3, we had a small stove fire, a track lighting transformer smoking, garage, garbage can smoking. 3131 Linden Street was a structure fire that was at Elias Markets. Again, you know, most of the majority of the calls were minor calls, either out on arrival, trash cans, smoldering things. The extra 30, 35 minutes it takes for the second due engine that would get there now.
Second, 35 seconds.
35 seconds. Wouldn't have any effect on those types of calls.
So just to summarize this slide, everything that's in kind of the beige was a fire of the 16. Let's make it 17. So of the 17 fires, 8 of them, just under half, given the fire that occurred a couple of days ago, were out upon arrival. So this is of all the structure fires going back to, so from 8, 9, 10, and most of 11. So almost 4 years. We're talking about 8 of the 17 were out upon arrival. The ones that were in blue are and only it would now be 4 in white, given the fire from a couple days ago, were structure fires where there was something, you know, that was not minor. I wanted to give you the call history for Dewberry. So at this point, this is kind of sort of the first phase of why we select, how we got to some of the economics and how we got to the impact of closing Dewberry on the operation, the justification and the impact on the operations of the fire department working under a 4-station versus a 5-station program. And we're going to turn it over now to Gordon and myself, and then at some point we're going to get Ralph in here as well. In fact, Ralph, if you want to just, why don't you, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, could we have Mr. Karp work on that microphone?
That'd be
so
fine.
We can facilitate
That's
this
fine.
discussion?
That's fine.
Thank you. I'd like to advance the slide. As most city council representatives and administration know, a lot of my decisions are based on data. So I'd like to just show this slide about call volume in EMS. Actually, in a week or so is my anniversary as a director of EMS. In 2001, September 14th is when Tom Decker and I were appointed director and assistant director. it's interesting how 10 years have gone by, and this is the history I'm going to give you. The first few years we evaluated our operation, but as you can see from this slide, the call volume has continually risen steadily to the point of where we're right now at about 7,376 calls as of the end of last month. With that, in 2004, I took it upon myself to welcome the mayor to his mayoralship for the city of Bethlehem. I got him and administration, and along with city council's approval, to add 4 additional paramedics to the EMS bureau to handle those call volume. That was right here. 2005 into 2006, we got 4 paramedics, and then subsequently the following year, we got 2 additional paramedics, which brought us to our complement of 24 full-time paramedics right now, along with 30 part-timers that we utilize to handle all of those calls. With that history, I'll tell you the history of what I experienced then. With the increase of calls brought the increase of men, which also brought the increase of our fleet size. When I took over as director, I stepped to our 3 garage bays, we had 3 ambulances. Shortly thereafter, when we hired the men in 2005, we needed to get another ambulance, and then another ambulance, and another ambulance in order to provide the commitment we provide on calls and standbys of different events throughout the city throughout the course of the year, and also allow for maintenance and breakdown of the vehicles and continue to have the vehicles when we need them. So our fleet now is up to 7, and we currently have 3 bays to house them in. So in 2004, one of my quests was to find more space for the men in the station and to find places to house the vehicles. I went to the fire commissioner at that time. We were in the fire department for about 6 months at that point, and Commissioner Moitzon back at that point in time said, we have room over at Company 9, let's go try there. So I proposed a plan to the mayor, and we moved over to Company 9 for about 10 months, and we realized some things were occurring. That station wasn't all that big itself. It had a kitchen table with 2 chairs, and now we have 4 men and no chairs and not enough room to eat. The fire department had their routine, the paramedics had their routine, and it just really wasn't working out. And we realized that we better go back to our station and function the way we used to and try another approach.
Just to, if I can, I include it as a backup so we all know that, again, part of the goal here is going back and looking at some of the options that we've explored as we've tried to look to modernize and expand our EMS facility. And I included the press release from October 18, 2004, where we announced the EMS moving to Company 9, just so everybody's clear on the dates, and then we can establish a very real timeline.
The bullet points that you see on the slide here were actual dates where administration and council had worked diligently to find a solution to our spatial needs. In between 2004 and 2007, there were other discussions on other options. We talked about renovating the station at Stefco and Broad, which we found that we were pretty much landlocked there with the space we have because it would have encroached on the parking we have very little of. So the expansion of that station really wasn't brought to the table with administration or city council. But then we got to 2007 and discussions which became imminent to city council and the mayor, that expansions of the Dewberry Fire Station and the Catasauqua Road Station, Company 9, would address our spatial needs at the tune of $1.2 million. With that said, I really didn't like some of the additions and renovations that were suggested because it just didn't accommodate the needs of EMS, a busy EMS service. With that said, we continued to look, even though the money had been budgeted in a bond, we continued to look for other options, and we looked at the Dick Millihan property, several other vacant lots, but all of them we would have used $1.2 million just to purchase land and have no money to build a building. So with that said, I contacted both hospital networks, St. Luke's and Lehigh Valley, They gave me lists of available land and spaces and possibilities in the city of Bethlehem. And we came to some discussions in 2008 with St. Luke's Hospital in renovating a building that they have on Eaton Avenue. It was dirt floors, not finished at all, and it would have been able to house 4 ambulances while we could have kept 3 ambulances back on Stepco Boulevard, which would have met our spatial needs at that time. However, some issues with the bond money came to light, and that was you couldn't utilize bond money to renovate something that the city doesn't own. St. Luke's couldn't come up with a contract where if we did renovate the building with city money and bond money, they wouldn't be able to give us the right of first refusal if they sold the building for us to purchase it. And at that point in time, renovation costs were escalating to the tune of $750,000.
So we tried to get around the bond money restrictions by approaching St. Luke's about a condo arrangement and actually purchasing sort of the back half of that building to allow us to use public bond dollars for those improvements and renovations. And that was not acceptable, and as Gordon pointed out, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to spend $750,000, which was ultimately what those renovation costs grew to, on a building we didn't own and whose future we couldn't control. And so, and I included as backup a memo from Gordon to myself dated December 29th, 2008, which talks about why the work that he had undertaken in order to identify the St. Luke's property. He points out the city has tried to identify a suitable location for an EMS station for several years. This is, again, back in 2008. Options such as undeveloped parcels and buildings already owned by the city, as well as privately owned parcels and buildings have been discussed. And while a few of these options may be possible, these options aren't as suitable or affordable as the one identified at 1107 Eaton Avenue, which is the St. Luke's facility. So again, in an effort to get everybody on council up to speed as to the history, I wanted to provide the backup information to be very clear that and to prevent any revisionist history about how we got to the point that we're at today. And then,
I just wanted to conclude part of my presentation at this point with where we got to 2009, 2010, the Hillocks Mill Road project, when the director of Parks and Public Property, Ralph Karp, realized that we weren't getting very far with our plan with St. Luke's. He came up with the idea that if we have this money available to us and we utilize city-owned land that he identified on Hillocks Mill Road, by utilizing the concept of a pole building type of construction, we may be able to pursue one facility out on Hillocks Mill Road that would house all of EMS in one building with the money that the city had available. So I just want to point out, the reason I'm pointing out this slide here is we talked about, back in 2004, we had 2 facilities. In 2007, we talked about having 2 facilities. In the renovations to St. Luke's Hospital's property and keeping Stepco Boulevard, we would have had 2 facilities. And in 2009 and 10, we would have gone to 1. And now we are at the point where we may be able to utilize the Dewberry Avenue station, which is right there, and the 540 Stepco Boulevard station at Broad and Stepco. I'll come back to this slide at the end of the presentation, but I just want to point out that this is 6 months of this year. The black dots on the slide are our calls. They're all over town. This is over on Dew Drive on the other side of South Mountain. And there's actually one call that we went into East Allentown that's off the slide here because we do mutual aid for other cities and townships when needed. These are the 2 hospitals, Lehigh Valley Muhlenberg and St. Luke's. And I'll refer back to that after Ralph talks about the EMS facility on Hillocks Mill Road.
Thank you, Gordon. As you all heard, the evolution of this property came about when other options just weren't playing out for us, and we believed that we could take the same amount of dollars and achieve what we wanted to achieve and accommodate the needs of EMS as identified using existing city property. The space worked because of its location. We had good access to all the major thoroughfares. We wouldn't be in a position where we would have to curb our operation to accommodate neighbors. Sightlines along the road were good. There were a lot of positive variables for locating it on the property. The location in mind is exactly between the existing ice rink facility, municipal ice rink, and the 9-hole golf course. So the facility would be located behind the ice rink building up there, and set back a few hundred feet from Illick's Mill Road. The intended egress and exit would be from between the tennis courts up on Illick's Mill Road and the existing brick house that sits up there today. The building grew in size a little bit from its original conceptual size as we went through design development on the project, and Gordon identified needs that he had in order to support one operation under one roof. The original plan was in the 10,000 square foot range. We also had accommodations to make after the project went through the review of the Planning Commission. So the building grew in size a little bit, but we had a 10-bay building that would, in our opinion, accommodate the needs for EMS probably for at least the next 15 to 20 years, I would say, with all the accoutrements inside that were needed to support the operation under one roof. When we put the project out to bid initially, we opted to go with a pole building style exterior shell construction with conventional fit out on the inside of the building. The original bid came in at $1,770,000, which was $470,000 over our anticipated budget. We decided to rebid the project, making some changes, and the number came in at $1,693,000. In utilizing some city labor and city workforce for some of the labor on the project, we believe we can complete the project for $1.6 million. I would note to you that typical construction for an emergency services building is unconventional construction is running roughly around $175 a square foot. This building costed out at $132 a square foot, and I pointed out that we have spent a significant amount of time wringing the costs out of this building to provide a good usable building that would serve the needs and function as a great EMS facility at a much less than customary cost. So we are at $132 a square foot for this construction, and it's about 25% less than the going rate these days. When the idea came about of remodeling Dewberry Fire Station and moving the EMS facility there, we took a serious look at what the Dewberry facility would need to accommodate this. For those that are stationed in the firehouse, they know that there's a brand new roof on that facility, there's a brand new heating and air conditioning system in the building, there are new windows, there's a new emergency generator. We have made investments in the exhaust system on the property there for the diesel exhaust. So that building's in pretty fair shape for a 30-year-old building. We went through the building and took a look at what we would need to do to update the building to accommodate Gordon's needs and just to give it a fresh face. The bathrooms are dated. The gathering room is a little tattered. The kitchen needs to be updated. We would make some other facility upgrades that would improve the overall operational efficiency of the building and bring it up to snuff. In addition to that, we scoped out adding 2 more bays to the facility. It's actually 1 bay, but it's 2 vehicles deep, so it would house 2 additional ambulances. So if the facility was to receive ambulances as it sits today, there could be 4 units housed there. And keeping the Stefco property, that would keep all of our ambulances, all 7, now undercover, whereas only 3 are undercover right now. With this proposal, we're considering adding those 2 additional spaces for ambulances now. So we are positioned to receive and address growth as we anticipate in future years. So the cost estimate right now to do that addition and to update the facility to accommodate the EMS needs is $325,000. The Stefco facility is in very good shape and needs some basic remodeling of restrooms and a few other, privacy spaces for HIPAA requirements for data entry, etc. Roughly about $25,000 in expense, and a lot of that work will be done using city personnel for a total expense of $350,000. So this is a summary slide of sort of where we were and where we'd like to go. The Ilix Mill plan, $1.6 million. We have $1.2 million available in city dollars. We're looking at a $400,000 shortfall. Plus we have to think about the operating expenses of that building. Have to heat it, have to have electricity, emergency generator, all those other things that go with operating a facility. The Stefco plan, projected cost of Dewberry Stefco plan is $350,000 in project cost, leaving $1.1 million available, and $750,000 available to the capital, and we avoid the $60,000 in the annual general fund charge for maintenance and operation.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
I'll speak about this. If we would utilize Dewberry Avenue, the plan to utilize it would be like this. We would house 4 ambulances on Dewberry Avenue. 1 ambulance would respond 24 hours a day from that location. At the current station on Stefco Boulevard, we would house 3 ambulances. 2 would respond during the day shift, which is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and 1 would respond out of that station from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I just want to back up to that slide I had mentioned earlier. This is an actual spatial analysis from our patient care reporting system for the dates 1/1/2011 to June 30th, 2011. That's half of a year. As I pointed out earlier, that would be the Dewberry location. This is the Stefco location. This is roughly this is roughly about 5,500 calls shown here, all these black dots. In that 6-month period of time, the patients we transport to the hospital go to one of the 2 interfacility hospitals, Muhlenberg or St. Luke's, inter-city hospitals, Muhlenberg or St. Luke's, 99% of the time. With that said, what I realized through this map and these 2 station locations, today, with only the 1 station at Stefco and Broad, if we're at Muhlenberg or St. Luke's or on Stefco Boulevard, there's this triangle that we are somewhere within that when we get dispatched to a call in the city. 50% of the time in a 24-hour day, we're not in the station. We're somewhere within this triangle, either at Muhlenberg, St. Luke's, or in the station. If we were to utilize both stations, we would have almost a square or a rectangle. And we would be somewhere in between that point, or that point, when we get dispatched on a call. So it became apparent to me that we need to house more ambulances at this station in order to address all of the need on the south side and the Broad Street corridor and adjacent homes and businesses of Stefco Boulevard, while on Dewberry Avenue, we can easily come across Ilix Mill Road and address all of the needs in the far west Bethlehem section and the northeast section of town and right here in Center City.
Now, the memo that you sent me December 29, 2008 indicated that 70% of patients that we transport to the hospital from the city request St. Luke's. Is that number still?
That's correct.
Valid?
70% go to St. Luke's, 29% go to Muhlenberg, and 1% go to Easton, Cedar Crest, or St. Luke's Allentown, and some to 17th Street in Allentown. But 99% of them go to these 2
So
hospitals.
they're not necessarily spread out evenly amongst the city if 70% of the time they go to St. Luke's. So again, we pointed, it speaks to the value of having Stefco Boulevard that close to the hospital so that they could go from St. Luke's to Stefco and back, which is probably going to be the more common route versus going from St. Luke's back to Dewberry. And again, we're going back to the future in the sense that we're back to a two EMS facility plan, which allows better EMS coverage throughout the city, in that square that Gordon pointed out. But we all recognize that the Sands has been a large driver of additional call volume. You've got Moravian Village across the street from the Stefco Boulevard facility. All of the calls that would occur in South Bethlehem, it's more proximate to St. Luke's, and the room for future. Most of the growth and expansion in the city of Bethlehem is going to occur on the LVIP 7, the Majestic, and the Steel Stacks property. And the Stefco Boulevard station is better positioned to cover those areas than the Dewberry station. But obviously the Dewberry station also has value as well, being in a different geography. And to me, what validated this plan was, as Gordon pointed out, if the plan as it's presented this evening, council would have two options. The Dewberry station can accommodate 4 ambulances as it's currently constructed, and we can accommodate 3 at Stefco. To leave Dewberry in its current form and do the improvements that Mr. Karp spoke about would cost about $125,000. The additional $200,000 in the improvements and costs of Dewberry would be the addition of 2 bays to accommodate the future growth. We've got 7 ambulances, 7 can be undercover, as Ralph pointed out. But by adding those 2 bays, we'd allow room. So we go from a 10-bay plan, which is the single station at Illick's Mill, to a 9-bay plan, both accommodating future growth, one far less expensive than the other, but also one providing better EMS coverage than the single plan. So we're again back to the future as far as having EMS facilities spread out amongst the city using the same principle that we have while we have multiple fire stations in the city. But going back to what validated the plan for me in many respects is that Gordon would station 2 ambulances at Stefco. Of the 3 that are sort of operating on it at a given time, he'd have 2 at Stefco and only 1 at Dewberry, which to me really speaks to the amount of volume that would come out and the access that Stefco would have relative to Dewberry, and frankly relative to the Illick's Mill, which is just down the street from the Dewberry station. So Stefco really does become a strategically currently for EMS services, looking at call volume, but I think even more strategic going forward when you look at where the areas of growth will be in the city. In conclusion, I think the plan that we've presented this evening continues to provide sound fire service and coverage to the city of Bethlehem. It does improve EMS coverage for the city. Again, one of the sort of negatives that if we went to the Illick's Mill plan, which would be the single station on Illick's Mill, the neighbors in and around Stefco would be losing a proximate EMS facility. So, if you're Moravian Village, if you're the Sands, if you're one of the companies that we're attracting to LVIP 7, if you're Marvine Pembroke, or if you're a resident in and along the Stefco Boulevard corridor, you would be losing the station in your neighborhood, the EMS station in your neighborhood, because we'd be going to a single station. So this plan does not only provide better coverage to the northeast, or north central and northwest portions of the city in terms of EMS, it doesn't take away coverage to other areas of the city. It meets our current and future EMS needs. It will provide, we would not spend $1.25 million of the capital fund So it would provide a savings to the capital fund. It would negate a $60,000 annual cost to operate the new facility, because we would not have an additional building to maintain, additional building to operate. It would still provide the $250,000 of funding for a pumper truck for next year, which would be an upgrade to an already improved fleet. And at the end of this whole process, even with the addition of the two bays at Dewberry to allow for future expansion. So in other words, the $350,000 plan versus the $150,000 plan, we would allow for $750,000 of capital available for a very necessary and needed $1.8 million 911